There is something about this coming Tuesday that you need to hear, and I do not say that lightly, because what is unfolding around May 5th carries the kind of weight that can quietly rearrange your entire perspective without asking for permission first. And if you have been moving through life recently, feeling like you're pushing forward without clear feedback, like you are investing effort into something that has not yet proven itself, then what I'm about to explain may land differently for you, because this is not one of those soft, barely noticeable shifts that pass by, unnoticed. This is not just another lunar phase drifting across the sky. This is a moment that has been building in silence, and the reason it matters begins with something that seems simple on the surface. The moon stepping into Capricorn. And I know that does not immediately sound like a turning point. But stay with this, because Capricorn energy does not announce itself loudly. It works underneath the surface, steady and uncompromising. And when it becomes activated in a larger astrological context like this, it creates a very specific emotional and psychological atmosphere, one that feels less like inspiration and more like accountability, less like dreaming and more like results being finalized. And if you've been in a phase where you questioned whether your effort was actually leading anywhere, this is where the narrative begins to shift, because the energy surrounding this transition is not random, it is precise, it is deliberate, and it carries the sensation of something being concluded and redistributed in a way that reflects what has truly been earned, rather than what has simply been hoped for. And that is where most people misunderstand what is happening. They think this is about sudden luck or some abstract idea of manifestation suddenly working. But what is unfolding on this day is far more grounded than that. It is about structure, solidifying about outcomes that hold weight, about results that are not temporary but built to last. And if you have felt recently like you have been putting in more than you are receiving, like the scale has been uneven for longer than it should have been, there is a reason for that imbalance, and it has not been meaningless, because what you have actually been moving through is a period of evaluation, even if you did not consciously recognize it. And this is where understanding Capricorn changes everything, because Capricorn does not operate on chance. It does not reward appearances. It does not respond to shortcuts. It is governed by Saturn. And Saturn is not emotional about your effort. It is precise, observant, and consistent, tracking patterns over time, watching how you show up when no one is reinforcing you, noting every moment where you chose discipline over comfort, every time you stayed committed when it would have been easier to walk away. And this is where something shifts internally when you really grasp it, because it means that nothing you have done has been invisible, even if it felt that way. And when the moon activates Capricorn, it is as if that long period of observation reaches a conclusion, as if the process of measuring and weighing is completed and something begins to move from evaluation into resolution. And this is why this moment feels different, because it is not about something new entering your life. It is about something already in motion, finally reaching a point where it can no longer stay unacknowledged. And you may already be sensing this before Tuesday even fully arrives. You may notice subtle changes in how people respond to you, conversations carrying more seriousness than usual, situations beginning to take shape in ways that feel more concrete than they have in a long time. And if that is happening, it is not coincidence. It is the early activation of this energy beginning to surface, building quietly before it reaches full intensity later in the day. And this is where the situation becomes even more focused. Because only a few hours after the moon moves into Capricorn, something else locks into place. Mercury forms an exact square to Pluto, and not just Pluto in motion, but Pluto at a standstill, preparing to reverse direction the following day. And that detail matters more than most people realize, because when a planet appears stationary, its influence does not disperse, it concentrates, it becomes almost pressurized, holding its force in one place rather than diffusing it across movement. And when Mercury, the planet associated with communication decisions, agreements and information, comes into a direct square with that level of concentrated Plutonian intensity. The result is not light or casual. It is not something you can easily dismiss or overlook. It is the kind of interaction that brings forward conversations that carry consequence, revelations that cannot be softened, information that lands with weight rather than suggestion. And psychologically, this is where many people feel the shift most strongly because it confronts them with something they can no longer reinterpret or delay. It asks for clarity where there has been avoidance. It exposes what has been building beneath the surface, and it does so in a way that demands acknowledgement. And that is why what emerges during this time is not surface level. It is substantial. It is something that changes how you understand your position, your progress, and what comes next, and if you are paying attention. You will begin to recognize that this is not just about what is happening around you, but about what is being revealed to you. And that realization is where everything begins to turn into something much more significant. What if the thing that arrives on that day is not subtle at all? What if it shows up in a form you cannot overlook, something like an agreement finally materializing after a long period of uncertainty? Or a message coming from someone whose authority actually carries weight in your life, or even financial information that instantly alters the direction you thought you were on. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is not about minor updates or passing news. This is about something that lands with a sense of finality, something that makes you pause and realize that from this point forward, things are no longer the same, and that feeling of significance is not accidental. It is part of a sequence that makes this entire moment far more powerful than it appears at first glance, because only 32 minutes after that intense interaction between Mercury and Pluto reaches its exact point, Mercury shifts into a supportive alignment with the North Node. And that detail changes everything because the North Node represents direction, not temporary movement, but long-term trajectory. Not short-term gain, but the path your life is gradually unfolding toward. And when communication decisions and revelations are immediately linked to that point, it means the information that surfaces, even if it feels heavy or confrontational at first, is not there to destabilize you. It is there to redirect you with precision towards something that actually aligns with where you are meant to go. And this is where the psychological experience deepens. Because what you initially interpret as pressure begins to reveal itself as guidance. What feels uncomfortable starts to show its purpose, and suddenly you are no longer reacting to events. You are recognizing that you are being positioned. And that shift in awareness is where everything starts to open, because now the struggle is no longer something you resist. It becomes the mechanism that produces the outcome you have been waiting for. And when you see that clearly, it changes how you hold the entire day. It stops feeling random and starts feeling intentional, almost as if every piece is placed exactly where it needs to be to move you across a threshold you could not reach any other way. And if you are paying attention to yourself right now, you may already notice that something inside you has been adjusting in preparation for this. Your emotional responses may not be as scattered as they were before situations that would normally trigger. You might feel easier to manage. And there is a reason for that shift, because the Capricorn Moon does not amplify emotional chaos. It organizes it. It takes what is inconsistent and gives it structure, allowing you to operate with clarity instead of reacting from impulse. And while some might misinterpret that as becoming distant or detached, what is actually happening is far more constructive. Your internal world is being reinforced, strengthened, in a way that allows you to handle something larger without losing stability. And this matters more than most people realize, because when opportunities that carry real consequence appear when recognition or advancement begins to take form, the biggest risk is not failure. It is self-disruption. It is reacting too quickly, doubting your own position, or unconsciously stepping back from what you have earned. And this is exactly what this energy is preventing it, is preparing you to receive without collapsing under the weight of what is arriving. And if you have noticed yourself becoming more serious, more focused on what actually matters rather than what is distracting, that is not a loss of lightness, that is alignment taking place. It is you calibrating to a level where your actions and your environment begin to match. And this is where the conversation becomes very specific, because while this shift touches everyone in some way, there are three groups of people who are standing directly in the center of this transformation, and those are the Earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And this is not arbitrary. These are the individuals who have been carrying the longest periods of sustained effort, the ones who continued building when there was no immediate validation, the ones who chose patience when others were chasing speed. And if you are one of them, then what you need to understand is that the phase of delay is reaching its conclusion. The period where everything felt like preparation rather than progress is closing. And what you have been constructing quietly, without recognition, without external confirmation, is about to begin showing results in a way that is tangible and undeniable, and not vague or symbolic, but concrete and measurable. And this is where we begin to look at how this unfolds for each sign, because the expression of this breakthrough is not identical. It is tailored. And for Taurus in particular, this moment carries a deeper layer. Because your experience over the past 7 years has not been simple since 2018, Uranus has been moving through your sign, and Uranus does not allow stability to remain untouched. It disrupts, it dismantles. It forces change in areas you once relied on for consistency, your sense of identity, your security, your financial grounding. All of it has been subject to repeated shifts. Just as you began to feel settled, something would change again, creating a cycle that felt never-ending. And what many people around you may not have fully understood is how exhausting that process has been, how it required you to continuously redefine yourself without losing your core. And that is why this moment is so important, because it marks the beginning of recognition not just from others, but within yourself, where everything you have been forced to rebuild starts to show its value. And as this unfolds, it sets the stage for what comes next. There is a moment here that you cannot overlook, because what has quietly shifted in your reality over the past week is far more significant than it may appear on the surface. And if you are a Taurus, this is where everything begins to feel different in a way that is both unfamiliar and long overdue, because Uranus has finally moved out of your sign on April 25th, ending a cycle that has been reshaping your life since 2018. And I want you to really sit with what that means emotionally, because for years you have been living inside an environment where stability could not fully exist, where just as you started to feel grounded, something would shift again, forcing you to adapt, to rebuild, to question parts of yourself you once thought were certain. And that kind of constant disruption does not just affect your external life. It changes how safe you feel in your own identity. It creates a subtle tension that never fully leaves your system. So now that this energy has lifted, even if only recently, what you are experiencing is not just relief. It is recalibration. The dust is settling in a way that allows you to finally see what you have actually built through all that chaos. And this is where Tuesday becomes the turning point. Because with both the Sun and Mercury moving through your sign, your first house is illuminated. And this is not symbolic visibility. This is real, tangible recognition. People are seeing you, not just casually noticing, but actually acknowledging the consistency, the quality, the grounded approach that you have maintained, even when everything around you was unstable. And psychologically, this can feel almost disorienting at first, because you have been so used to working without that level of attention that when it arrives, part of you questions, it wonders if it will last. But this is where the deeper shift is happening. Because the conversation that unfolds under that Mercury squared Pluto in your career sector is not there to test you. It is there to reveal your position, and it may begin with intensity. It may feel like you are being challenged or pushed into a space where you have to stand firmly in your value. But what follows immediately? As Mercury forms that supportive connection to the North Node in your house of gains and networks, is resolution alignment. An opening that confirms that what you have been building is not only valid, but ready to expand. And this is where the outcome becomes real, not abstract, something like a promotion that has taken far too long, finally being confirmed, an increase in income that reflects your true worth, or an opportunity that secures your financial direction in a way you can actually rely on. And the deeper impact of that moment is not just external, it is internal, because it shifts how you see yourself. It replaces doubt with evidence. And that is something you carry forward into everything that comes next. And as this energy settles, it naturally transitions into another layer that is just as important. Because for Virgo, this is not about identity. It is about validation of skill. And I need you to understand how significant this is, because everything you have been refining, every detail you have perfected, every time you chose precision over speed even when it slowed you down, that has not been wasted effort. It has been preparation, and on Tuesday that preparation reaches a point of activation because Mercury, your ruling planet, is directly involved in this intense alignment. And when Mercury is triggered at this level, you feel it in your thinking, in your perception, in the way you process information. And what this square to Pluto does is strip away the excess it burns through over-analysis. It clears the mental loops that have kept you hesitating, and what remains is clarity sharp, focused, undeniable. And with the Sun and Mercury positioned in your 9th house, the area connected to expansion visibility and reaching beyond your usual environment, combined with the Moon activating your 5th house of creativity. What you have been developing privately is no longer contained. It moves outward, it becomes visible to a wider audience. And this is where the shift can feel almost immediate, because recognition does not trickle in slowly. It arrives in a way that demands your attention. A project gaining traction faster than expected, someone with influence noticing your work, an offer appearing that aligns perfectly with the skills you have been refining. And psychologically, this is the moment where frustration transforms into momentum, where the feeling of being overlooked is replaced by the realization that your timing was simply different, not delayed. And as that realization takes hold, it naturally leads into the final piece of this sequence, because for Capricorn, this is not just another day, this is alignment in its most direct form. And if there is any sign that embodies the energy of this moment, it is you, because when the Moon enters your sign, it does not create something new. It activates what has already been built. It brings your presence to the forefront in a way that does not require explanation or justification. People feel it without you needing to prove it. And that is where your power lies right now, in the quiet certainty of someone who has done the work, who understands their value without needing external validation. And emotionally, this creates a rare sense of cohesion, where your internal state matches your external direction, where the usual doubts that surface, that subtle voice questioning whether you are ready, becomes silent. Not because it has been ignored, but because it no longer has a foundation to stand on, and with the Sun and Mercury in your 5th house connecting back to your sign, something shifts in how you approach what you do. It is no longer just discipline. It is engagement. It is a sense of enjoyment, entering a space that was once defined only by responsibility. And that change may seem small on the surface, but its impact is profound, because when effort is supported by genuine alignment, it becomes sustainable. It becomes something you can continue building without resistance. And that is where this entire sequence is leading into a space where what you have worked for is not only recognized, but integrated into a reality that finally reflects it. There is a shift happening here that goes deeper than simple progress, because what you are stepping into is no longer just about building something step by step. It is about finally engaging with something that feels alive to you, something that does not just demand effort, but gives energy back in return. And that is where everything begins to change. Because when what you create starts to resonate with you on that level, it stops feeling like obligation and starts feeling like purpose. And this is exactly where the next layer of this moment reveals itself. Because for Capricorn Saturn, your ruling planet has been moving through your third house, the space connected to communication agreements and the mental frameworks you rely on to navigate your world. And for months, this has not been easy. It has required you to slow down, to refine how you express yourself, to become more precise in how you think, to face delays that may have felt frustrating or even unfair at times, especially when you knew you were ready to move forward. But circumstances kept asking for more patience, more discipline, more clarity, and psychologically, that creates a very specific kind of pressure. One where you begin to question whether the pace will ever change, whether the effort will ever translate into something tangible. But this is where Tuesday becomes the release point, because the energy shifts from containment into activation, from preparation into execution. And what has been held back begins to move. Contracts that felt stuck begin to finalize. Conversations that carried weight but no resolution start to close with clarity. Recognition that seemed delayed finally arrives in a way that cannot be ignored. And this is not minor progress. This is something that alters your position in a real and lasting way. It could be stepping into a leadership role that reflects the authority you have been developing. It could be a long-term project, reaching the point where it launches into the world with strength. It could be your expertise, being acknowledged at a level that opens doors you have been working toward for years. And what matters most is not just the external outcome, but the internal realization that comes with it. Because you begin to see that everything you have been building has structure, has permanence, has a foundation that can support what comes next. And that is the difference with Capricorn energy. It does not create fleeting moments, it creates systems that endure. And when that structure finally reveals itself, it does so in a way that feels undeniable. And as that unfolds, there is something you need to understand about how to move through this day, because this is not a passive experience. This is not about waiting for something to arrive without your participation. The energy is present, but it requires your awareness, your willingness to engage with it consciously. And that begins with paying close attention to communication later in the day, especially in the evening hours, because there is a window where the interaction between Mercury, Pluto, and the North Node becomes most active. And what comes through during that time is not random. It carries significance. It may arrive as a message, a call, an email, something that at first glance seems like just another piece of information, but quickly reveals itself to hold more weight than expected. And this is where many people miss their moment. They dismiss it. They delay responding. They underestimate its importance. But if you stay present, if you recognize the shift in tone, you will see that this is where direction begins to change. And alongside that awareness comes something equally important. Your intuition is going to feel different, more grounded, less reactive, more certain. And that is the influence of the Capricorn Moon, creating stability in your emotional body, allowing you to sense what is aligned without being overwhelmed by doubt. So if something feels significant, if an opportunity feels right, if a conversation carries a sense of importance, trust that signal, because it is not coming from impulse. It is coming from clarity. And this leads into another crucial point, which is your relationship with your own value, because this is not the day to minimize what you have done. This is not the moment to shrink back or downplay your achievements if you are asked about your work. Speak about it fully if you are placed in a position where you need to express your worth. Do it without hesitation, because what is happening here is not just external recognition, it is an exchange. the universe aligning your effort with reward. But that exchange requires you to be open to receiving, and many people unconsciously block that by staying too small in how they present themselves and at the same time. It becomes essential to remain aware of your environment because not everyone will be moving through this energy in the same way some may be experiencing the more challenging aspects of these transits, which can manifest as tension conflict or emotional instability. And if you find yourself being pulled toward that, the most important thing you can do is step back, not engage, not absorb what is not yours. Because your focus needs to remain on what you are building, not on what is unraveling around you. And as you move through this, there is a deeper realization that begins to settle in. One that reframes everything you have been through over the past few years, because there have been moments where the effort felt disproportionate to the results, where you questioned whether consistency still mattered, whether integrity still had value, especially when you saw others moving ahead with less dedication, and those moments leave an imprint. They create doubt. They make you question the system you are operating within. But this is where Tuesday becomes the answer to that internal question, because it brings evidence, not theory, not reassurance, but actual proof that what you have invested has been seen, has been measured, and is now ready to be returned to you in a form that is real. And the most important part of that realization is understanding the difference between luck and earned outcome. Because luck can appear and disappear without warning. It is unpredictable. It does not create stability. But what you have built through discipline, through consistency, through choosing the harder path when it mattered, that creates a foundation. Something that does not vanish, something that supports everything that follows. And if you are one of the earth signs, if you have been doing the work even when it felt unnoticed, this is the moment where the direction begins to change, where delays begin to lift, where recognition starts to take form. And when that happens, there is a final understanding that becomes clear, that none of the difficulty was without purpose. Every challenge, every moment where you wanted to step away but chose to continue, was shaping your capacity to handle what is now arriving. And that is why this moment matters. Because it is not just about receiving success, it is about being ready for it, and whether you realized it or not. You have been preparing for this all along, and now you are standing at the point where that preparation becomes reality, and that is where everything begins to move forward in a completely different way.